meeting. We are continuing our discussion of the Fayetteville Streetscape Plan.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Before I kick it over to Kim Bowers to lead the presentation, just want to make a couple of notes. So you'll recall that the charge was to create a prioritization, essentially, and assign some costs to some of the potential improvements that could be made in Fayetteville Street and the associated plazas. So what you'll hear in the presentation is information on potential areas to subtract, potential areas to add, some rough ideas of cost. And ultimately, what we're looking for you to do is provide us with kind of a prioritized list of things that we can do with the budget available to make some immediate improvements, which Mr. Bowers will share with you in the course of the presentation. I do want to also make a note. We did have some conversation at the last committee meeting about the R line and potential adjustments to service. I will tell you that is not on today's agenda. The Transportation Department put together a really comprehensive memo related to the R-Line service that was included in last week's manager's update, which I certainly encourage you to take a look at if you didn't have an opportunity to see it or notice it. There will be a future conversation that we intend to bring back to the committee related to some opportunities for adjustments related to the R-Line, but did just want to call out the work of transportation staff and that providing that information and the fact that this is something that you will see in a potentially a 2026 committee meeting. So with that, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Bowers to get us started.
Thanks. So Ken Bowers, Planning and Development. We're going to start with a big table of numbers. You asked for cost estimates, and here they are. I would just highlight a couple things off of this, and don't feel like you have to memorize this because we're going to return to this exact slide towards the end of my slide deck. And go through this in a little more detail and then talk about what we can do in the current budget year without additional capital funds. But the bottom line number is that the plan that's before you to do 5 blocks is a fairly costly project that's coming in close to $17 million, not including 20 to 25% on top of that for the design development fees and construction administration. So it's a major project, but we've broken this out into a bunch of different chunks to talk about how implementation might be phased in. And at the very end of it, we'll talk about what we think we can do for $1 million in the current budget year. So as Mr. Raleigh said, the plan talks about taking existing features away from the streetscape, mostly to make room for more different kinds of activity for commerce and outdoor dining, as well as activations, because the existing features are not adding a lot of activity to the street. We're going to focus more on additive features. The feedback we got at the last meeting was we don't want to hear just about removing stuff. We also want to be adding stuff back. This can't just be about reducing the number of amenities in the street. It has to be about replacing those amenities with different amenities that are better suited to the future of the street. And then we'll talk about what we can refresh in terms of upgrading some of the things that are out on the street today. So let's get into a little details as to how we have allocated and talked about phase 1. So the phase 1 subtractions are basically getting stuff out of the way of a revised pedestrian path that provides more room for outdoor tables up against the building face. And the things that have to be removed are some granite seat walls. We confirmed those are in fact solid blocks of granite. The benches would be either removed or relocated, basically turned 90 degrees to free up some space. The horizontal planters, the planters that are at grade level, I think as you can see clearly in this photo, the stuff that's elevated, like the pots and the planting beds, that vegetation is in very good shape, very well maintained. The planters have tended to be trampled, and they're mostly dirt and some scraggly liriope currently. And we could, of course, plant more stuff in there, but it would probably meet a similar fate as the plantings have to date. So removing those potentially frees up a lot of space within what's currently called the furniture zone. But we wouldn't change anything with the vertical planters or the utilities or the street trees as part of this, nor would we change pavers other than to backfill areas with either pavers or concrete, as the case may be. So what will we add in the place of that in phase one? We would come back with wayfinding and placemaking elements, and we would look at potential toolkit elements such as the outdoor swings, movable seating, fixed seating, interactive art and seating. Now, doing all of this in phase one for the whole corridor would be about $500,000, about $100,000 per block. And when we say block, that's a double-loaded block, not a single side of the street. Some similar thing with the toolkit, a little bit more expensive, and of course, these costs are could vary depending on what exactly it is that we put back. Some things are more expensive than others. A swing is more expensive than movable seating, for example. But these are our current thoughts as to where that would be. When we got further into the process, obviously there would be refinement. And then the types of placemaking and wayfinding that the plan currently calls for tries to incorporate wayfinding signage into something that's a little bit more visually interesting and artistic. And here's two examples of that. A lot of this is trying to leverage Raleigh's status as the capital city and Fayetteville Street being branded as North Carolina's Main Street as well as Raleigh's Main Street to reinforce that image. The activation toolkit, and some of the stuff here is a little bit small, but we've looked at outdoor dining setups of about $11,000, fixed seating would be about $14,000, movable seating about $6,000, interactive furniture about $35,000. Some of the stuff on this list would be something that we would throw open to private entities, so a retail kiosk or retail display, or might be something that a vendor would provide, and we would just make the space available for that through a permit or license agreement. So these are just examples of some of the rough costs we have for things that are in that activation toolkit that could go in the space that's been freed up. What would be refreshed? We have a few ideas. We talked at the last time about the utility cabinets and news racks, is removing some of the superstructure, reducing the scale of that, and refreshing it with some new installations. The chess tables, which are only in one location, they're in front of the Sir Walter Raleigh Apartments, could be removed and refreshed with a different installation. And then we could add some color to the street in the short term by taking some of the benches and repainting them so that they're no longer black. We also would look to install additional waste receptacles, again, to help keep the street clean. So that's all the stuff that was included in our phase one cost estimates. When we start getting into phase two, this is where some of the more expensive items come in. So if all these vertical elements typically have infrastructure in there, they have power, they have water and irrigation. All that stuff would have to be either relocated or capped. So removing the urns and the utilities, and then there's some in-ground lighting. A lot of it is not functional anymore. Probably most of it is not functional anymore. So that's so these are some additional costs totaling up around $400,000 for the whole corridor. Adding back is more elaborate and festive lighting. We're still working with the design team on a lighting plan, so these costs are very preliminary. One of the ideas is expanding the tree pits in order to keep people from trampling the dirt in the tree pits, and hopefully being able to host some plantings in there. Would be adding some fences. We've looked at something that's about 2 feet high as being the right compromise between something that's not too visually intrusive, but it's enough of a barrier to step over that you would have to be very intentional about it. And it would send a clear message for pedestrians to stay out of there. The purpose of the expanded tree pits, though, is to define these zones in between the tree pits that can be individual activation areas that can have their own unique personality. And in this case, doing all that work is quite expensive. We're looking at $1.9 million, and then adding the full suite of wayfinding, public art, and activation toolkits would also be another $2.2 million. Then the refreshing elements would be tackling the pavers. So right now, there is a differentiation of color of pavers depending on the different zones. So the street was designed with, this is the walking area, this is the furniture area, they're different colors, there's a marble inset that delineates them. And of course, when we change that in phase one, we're not proposing to change that because it's quite expensive to do that. However, long term, you would want to refresh the streetscape. What we're looking at is replacing pavers with stamped concrete for these new activity zones. And the idea here would be something that would not be reliant on a particular vendor's paver spec to maintain going forward, but over the long haul could be maintained. And would also, I think, be somewhat more durable. Also included in phase 2 is this idea of highlighting the intersections as something special and different from a routine downtown intersection with special paving, doing the same thing for the mid-block crossings. And then if we really want to upgrade the utilities so that food trucks and special events no longer have to bring in loud and polluting generators in order to run their kitchens during special events, that would be another $1.6 million. And then we're talking about some modest changes such as replacing bicycle racks and removing the cigarette receptacles that currently exist in favor of the new waste stations that would have been installed in phase 1. So these are the proposed designs showing a rendering of what the 100 block might look like. This is in front of the Alexander deck. And then you've seen this before, looking at the 200 block of Fayetteville Street. So back to that big table of numbers. Our implementation options are, and for, if we want to do quarter phase 1 for the whole, if we want to do phase 1 for the whole quarter, we're looking at nearly $4 million for that, and then another 13 for doing all of phase 2. The other option is to look at target blocks, and the target blocks that we discussed at the last meeting were blocks 100 and 200. As we'll get to it, DRA has also shown an interest because of the existing restaurants on the east side of the 300 block, and we'll talk about that as we get to the short-term phase 1. But it would be about $1.5 million to do a full phase 1 implementation on 2 blocks, and about $5.2 million to do a full phase 1 and phase 2, or to an additional $5.2 million to do phase 2 on the 100 and 200 blocks. So the total for both of those would be around $6.7 million. Now let me break down row G on this, which is looking at various interventions on 5 blocks that we've tried to see what's the most impactful stuff we could do for about $1 million, because that seems to be about what we might be able to find within current resources to do in this fiscal year, absent a additional capital budget allocation. So repainting and relocating the benches, work we can largely do in-house, be about $70,000. Removing the horizontal planters from targeted locations. So on the 100 block, the dining is on the east side of the street. That's where the need is. We would do only the east side only. We would do the east and west side of the 200 block, and then the east side only of the 300 block, and that's around $440,000. And then taking out all the granite seat walls, there's 37 of them in total. This would go up and down the entire street, so that reallocation of space that's being talked about could happen. So just to be clear, both the benches and the seat walls would come out for all 5 blocks. And then we would do a targeted initial allocation of wayfinding and or activation elements to replace some of the stuff that was removed in those areas. That's around $360,000, so that all totals up to $1 million. So that's our recommendation if we're going to do a short-term implementation of what we would do. I'm going to pause there, and I also wanted to recognize Danya Sandeep and Dylan Bruckhouse, who did the bulk of the work. We got these cost estimates literally late Thursday, and so we had to do a lot of slicing and dicing and understanding of them to summarize them, and they did amazing work. And Dave Toms from McAdams, who's our private sector project manager, is also here in case there's any questions that I'm unable to answer for you. So City Plaza. The main thing that the committee asked us to look at was the addition of a permanent band stage to the plaza. Now, let me say that the consultants have looked at some design concepts. They've proposed a location for it. We have a very rough cost estimate, but it's not Nothing has been engineered at this point. There's been some preliminary look at the structure on which it would sit, but there's some more work that needs to be done on that. And I think before we put time and money into that, we want to make sure that that is definitely something that the council wants us to devote resources to. So first off is location, and it's got to go on either the east side or the west side. The argument for the east side is there's just a lot more room for it between the existing retail pavilions. They're more widely spaced, and so not only can you accommodate the stage, but you can have significant opportunities for seating around the stage if you put it on the east side. The argument for putting on the west side is that the stage provides a new shade structure that's permanent. When there wasn't a performance, you could sit on the stage. And the west side tends to be sunnier during the lunch hour than the east side does, so the shade would be more beneficial there. That said, of course, we've been deploying shade solutions in the plaza to date, and so we do have that toolkit still available. The recommendation that we're putting in front of you is that because of the additional room, the fact that it doesn't sit directly within the walkway and visibility to the main building entrance like it would in front of the Truist Tower, which is to Hanover, where the stage would be directly kind of blocking the view shed into the building entrance, that the east side of the street is the better location for it. So that's in front of 1 Hanover. So just our estimated cost here, and this is very rough, is about $1.65 million to put a band stage into City Plaza. In order to make room for it, we would be removing the planters that are on the west side of the plaza or east side of the plaza today, and we would have to provide utility hookups for the stage. And then, again, we haven't done any detailed design or structural studies to date. So option one, kind of using the rings of an oak tree as a metaphor, as sort of an oculus around design. It does have the feature that there is a hole in the middle of it, which does limit its utility for shade. Option two kind of borrows design elements from the pavilions themselves in terms of basically having a square roof that's supported by columns in the middle. This would probably provide a lot of shade. And the platform itself has been designed with 2 levels of seat walls, so when it wasn't being used for a performance, those seat walls would provide sort of casual seating opportunities, and of course the stage is large enough that you could also put some movable tables and chairs up there as well. This is just another round concept that uses more of a acorn-inspired curved structure to provide some additional shade, and then this is sort of a variation that's similar to the rectangular option, except the columns are at the perimeter of the roof as opposed to in the middle of it. And again, the shape of it is designed to emulate the cross-section of a tree. So in addition to my presentation, Raleigh Arts is here, and they have an extensive presentation responding to the committee's request for opportunities to deploy more art on Fayetteville Street, but I thought it might be appropriate for me to pause here and take any questions on the material I just presented to you.
I have one question.
Sure.
Opportunities for art, is that built into this $1 million phase, I guess, now budget, or would that be separate?
It would be built in it to the extent that some of the activation toolkit could include artistic elements, but an actual solicitation for an artist to design a mural or some other sculpture installation is not included in that $1 million.
Okay. Well, for purposes of, I guess, providing feedback, I'm comfortable with this sort of phase 1A or now that was presented. I'd like to just get moving on it. And for the stage in City Plaza, I think there's consensus that we would like to do it. I think a design that provides the most shade, since that is one of the problems we're trying to solve for, makes most sense. I will say I'm not particularly inspired by the really square-looking one, and if the point is to provide more visual interest to the street, then perhaps option 4, which is similar to the square one in that it has a solid roof, but it is shaped more like a tree trunk, may provide like a stage that also provides seating shade and looks like a piece of art. So that's my
Yeah, I think that these were very preliminary concepts put together by the design team. And we could probably incorporate the best of all the options into a single option, as you stated. Maybe a more interesting shape, but also the seat walls from option 2 might be a good addition to that.
Anything else on this section?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate all the work and the surgical approach of sides of blocks, elements, the $1 million. I mean, I think that sounds like a good use of money. Going back to just more aesthetics on that piece, I like just repositioning the benches. Some of the examples you showed of sort of permanent seating or sort of art and play seating, I just think we have to be careful with that because some of that stuff, it almost looks like it's already outdated. It looks like something you would see. Anyway,
Right.
it's just a matter of taste, but I just think you have to be cautious there because you could spend money on something and it really not, and even the colors of the benches and what we're going for, just worth some debate, but I trust we can figure all that out. And then, yeah, on the bandstand, I kind of agree. It's such a square, quadratic, hot, like non-organic space that trying to have something that has more curvature and natural form, I agree, shade is critical. So I don't know what that is, but I had sort of imagined the half-shell bandstand. I just don't know how that actually, from a shade perspective, how does that perform?
Probably not, in terms of shade for seating, probably not that well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add to the band stage. I did like option 3 from the aesthetics, the acorn. It looks like it gives you 2/3 of shade, but again, that's just from this drawing.
Right.
So it's kind of an in the middle. You got the aesthetics, but also you get some shade. So just to clarify, it looks like the band stage the cost is beyond what's in our current budget. So that would be something we would have to think about allocation for fiscal year 26.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up so I didn't have to.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. And I just also would like some information, I think, perhaps before we make that recommendation, how often would the stage be used and in what capacity? I mean, I have an idea, but I think that would be useful to be able to convey to the public.
Yeah, I think that given the expense and the purpose, that frequent programming would be something that we would look to do with our partners.
And I want to add one more thing too. I love the interactive wayfinding. I think it looks like art and it's also visually interesting. I can imagine people just taking pictures in front of like the vertical one that says, Raleigh, North Carolina. One thing I want to be careful about though is those are static, and so then as things and places change, they become out of date very quickly.
Right.
One of the thorns in my side has been all these like Raleigh maps you see downtown. They're all faded, they're cracked, they're not accurate anymore. I think when we put the digital kiosks in, those were great because they're modifiable easily. And so I definitely think we should do some permanent wayfinding because it acts as public art, but I'm wondering if there's a way we can make sure that they can be updated and that needs to be included too. Because what I don't want is places and things on there that no longer exist or new things that are not listed, and because they become very antiquated very quickly.
Yeah, I think what we would look to do, and this is something we can take back to our design team, is have the actual, the very small portion of this Raleigh NC thing actually has any text on it, is make that a plate that can be easily fabricated in-house and changed out as need be. I think one of the issues that we had with the current wayfinding system is very nice design, very custom. Our own fabrication shop was not able to make those signs, so we were reliant on an outside vendor every time something needed to be changed, and that was very costly. And we frankly weren't budgeting for it because it wasn't a huge priority. So I think the strong sense of staff today is to look for stuff that our own internal resources can keep up to date without having to work with outside contractors for every little update to a wayfinding system.
I got one more. I appreciate that you did both City Plaza and the main Fayetteville Street. We have also had this discussion about the connections between Fayetteville and Wilmington Street, and at
Yes.
least one of those. So do we have any recommendations today on that?
Yeah, we do. In fact, when I turn the mic over to Sarah Powers from Raleigh Art, she's going to touch on some preliminary recommendations for the plaza. I think we looked, obviously Exchange Plaza is in a bit of flux because it's not that long from now that the city will be vacating our building at One Exchange Plaza, moving into the new city hall, and then that building will be on the market, and certainly the new owner will want to have a say about the future of that plaza. We have looked at Market Plaza and some short-term recommendations there. Some of them relate to public art. There's also some at-grade level planning areas that could probably be turned into hardscape because they have not proven to be durable or maintainable over time. So we will be getting to that.
In the next presentation, the art presentation?
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, why don't we do that, and then we can, if there's anyone here from the public who wants to talk, and then we can take it back for discussion.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Sarah Powers with Raleigh Arts, and we've tried to put as many bright colored things in our slides as possible. So thanks for having us here, and my team, the public art team, but also all the folks that are downtown all the time are always inspiring when they get excited about public art. And now Fayetteville Street, we built that before we had a % for Art program, which may or may not be a recurring theme of some of the things we talk about when we get into our process. I'll start with basically how we work. We're an internal consultant. We're subject matter experts in art. Our job is to bring an artist in to inform and make the project more creative. We don't expect our consultants to invent all the art. We come in, hire an artist. So I'll go a little over about how that works and how we embed ourselves into project teams. And then I'll get to show some of the sort of scale and materiality we're looking at the different price points. This is a design phase, or design process with phases, maybe even sections, so we want to make sure, understanding the flexibility, that we're following along with these decisions as well. So our public art program, we're not a big team, but we're pretty mighty. We have our permanent program anchored in the % for art. That's 1% of all your major capital projects, but we also purchase artwork and design or have artwork donated. Temporary, murals, social practice, yarn bombing, video projections. Those are things that are either very quick or maybe up to 10 years. A mural can last a few months or a year, but it's still not permanent. It means there's something about it, it's not gonna last forever, and we don't wanna invest in maintaining something that's just gonna have, it's going to go away. We also do a lot of public art with the community to engage them with our process. And that might be something really fun in a meeting, but it also is, programs like the Facade Grant can fund murals. Looking at the neighborhood art funds, which you might have you hire a band to have a community event. So thinking about all the different ways we can engage our residents with public art. Everyone, I think, agrees about this. Watching the last meeting, these are a lot of things you brought up, so I thought it'd be we get it, we understand there's a huge opportunity and value. We see all the ways that public art, especially at a grand scale, can really change and transform a space, but also really can connect our residents, and we can see our stories, our experience reflected if we bring in local artists as well as sort of big national transformative projects. We've also done a lot of art in downtown, but not a lot of % for art projects. So I think when we have the scale frustration, why don't we feel like there's a lot of art downtown? I think a lot of it's because the scale is small, or it's temporary, or it goes away. So thinking about that, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, the New Bern Corridor has a tremendous amount of public art embedded into it. We have a wayfinding artist in resident. Thank you for funding that last year. Their concept designs are really colorful. They're really fun. They'll be around downtown to connect folks to the different attractions downtown where it's maybe not as fun, where there is a building without a big activation on the ground floor, trying to enliven that. And also, sort of show a little bit of local pride and some energy that folks can really access. We love working with partners like transportation, the basketball court mural at the old DMV site. Plus, we do have some incredible % for art projects coming when City Hall and the Convention Center gets open. But we still need more public art. So I think just to note the scale that's needed is sometimes you need all of it. The starting point, we're starting today at this presentation with just a location. We're not sure of the budget. We think we know the goals, but we'll probably need to refine those as going on. But just location means we can do whatever we want, which is a really hard place for us to know what to tell you what to do. Because I could come in and say, we need $80 billion. It's going to be great. Or we can really work along with the design process. So at every section, every decision, we know we get a percentage of that, or we know the wayfinding budget is going to be for artists. Some sort of traction we can get, and as we go through the design process for this whole area, those decisions will be either really obvious, something like Market Plaza, where we have a lot of control over, but really the point is bringing in an artist to have way better ideas than any of us about what that public art should be, and then they take that work through. But we're selecting them after we know the scope, we know what the intention is, we know the scale, the budget. Do people want to play on it? Are they going to be swings? So bringing in the right artist and contracting with them to kind of go through everything. They also work with design teams. They go through a design review with our board that's very rigorous, so we also know you're making all those right steps into getting it to the right place. And there's lots of chance for the public to get engaged too. I put these slides up because I love that Chavis Park started out with a 0.5% for art, $43,000 for a painted mural. Chavis did not spend their... The design team embedded David Wilson in the design team, gave him the glass budget to really make that mural something iconic. All the sunshades became part of the artist's scope, so he could leverage all of that to make something really big. Same two-dimensional imagery, right? Same as paint, but this little, painted mural on the side of that would not have the impact that the Chavis, the glass frit. Now, the percent for art was not going to get to that budget, but that's where you bring them in. They're creating a unique site-specific. They're talking to the community. These weren't stories. This wasn't an imagery that needed to be buried. The designers got it. We got there. So, to repeat it, this is the design project strengthens all this. So that's why I want to make sure you have some trust in our process, so that when we go through all these decisions, that you'll know we'll be right there to figure out the right artist to do this. We took a stab at the public art goals. We understand we want it to be vibrant. It's our main street too. We walk up and down it. If it's a sunny day and it's not too hot, it really comes alive. It's a space that can, it's got a lot of good things going. And the built environment, how do we make it more attractive? How do we make it distinctive in our own? And then we have a great artist community. At the last meeting, hiring local artists was brought up as a great opportunity. And I think, of course, and then maybe more than one artist, because there's a lot of different ways this can go. We're recommending a sort of a design approach. So viewshed is something we think a lot about when we think about City Plaza and Fayetteville Street. We don't want to block the Capitol and the Performing Arts Center. It's something, when they developed the streets plan, was very important. If we take, for public art, a viewshed, it's just like, when you're looking around, is it a block, is it a plaza? But the artist would have the flexibility to maybe recommend a few different items in that area. It also could sort of gives us the flexibility to work in phasing as well as on different sections in different times. So this is a little bit more in the weeds about what that could be. This, the Commerce Place was a project. It ended up a street mural, but the idea was we bring in an artist to sort of throw out ideas. What different materials, what different planes could we use to change how people experience a space? So we might say these are all the things that we're up for. These are materials that have been agreed that they're fine or safe or going to work with the streetscape that's coming, and then we let the artists come up with a great plan. There are a lot of possible interventions. This is where it gets a little more fun, a little less about process and a little more about all the possibilities. So Ken did a great job going over the nitty-gritty of what can be replaced, what can be removed, and that's, at any of those interventions, an artist could get involved. If the benches are being replaced, do we hire artists to make new benches? If we are looking at the ground plane and we're pulling out pavers does an artist help design something that goes in the middle of it? In the bigger phase where you're buying, you're investing in new infrastructure, artists could come in any of those elements and make them sort of at a bigger scale. So some ideas. That's Market Plaza. What if it had a light under it? Bringing in an artist to figure out how to make existing infrastructure look better. It can be simple. It can be mosaic, changing the surface material, bringing in light. These are smaller scale interventions. Colored ground, we found great examples of using, concrete is a great, you can dye it, there's stains, it's much more permanent, but mosaic interventions, the foil tape wayfinding and vinyl, a little more durable than paint, but also can be replaced without as much of a need for having someone to come over and stand on, kneel down and paint again. Flexi pave, we've all seen it at playgrounds, but it's, artists have done cool design work in it, so it can be more than just a solid surface, especially with some of these, dirty areas that are not going to ever have mulch again. Those are having an artist decide what colors and how that looks is an easy opportunity to make something more vibrant. Phase 2, or maybe in one of these view sheds, having a little bit more engagement with the artist. This is one design. If we hired artists to do these, I think we wouldn't know how cool they could look. So thinking about which of the elements could we bring an artist in to, instead of just the purchase, bringing in something more custom. I think there's probably more examples, but this is a pretty obvious one. And we've just had a great experience in Gibson Play Plaza and on New Bern, bringing in a poet to work with the wayfinding, as well as other artists. Fixed play, artists can get involved with these kind of creative seatings. I think Urban Conga, the xylophone seat, we're working with them on a project. They are really fun. They have great ideas. Interactive seating, bright color, it kind of hits on all those levels. Swings. Artist-made swings we love looking them up. We love looking at precedent images. I think it'll be a fun thing to do. The big piece de resistance is actual sculpture, not just functional or small intervention. So this is maybe phase 2, but there are lots of great ways to take, transform a space using artwork on the larger scale that folks are interacting. It's changing how they feel in the environment. Lighting is popular, and probably Market Plaza. It's narrow. We can probably figure out a cool way to take what's a boring light and having an artist come in and making it much more interesting. This is something you asked for. City, we have 2 pedestals. This is, we had a program to borrow art, an art loan program. It's very small. We did put the acorn there permanently on the south end. Looks great. But if we could, commission something large and big, it really could. You didn't even notice the old sculptures, and people stood on them. They sort of disappeared. So something big there is something, I think, wherever it comes in the phasing, to commission something for there, those pedestals are going to stay. The loan didn't work. It's a hardship on the artist to borrow artwork. They're very small. They don't have anywhere to store them, and it costs a lot of money. I mean, you just pay a moving company a lot of money to have and the artists get a little bit, but they have to fabricate it on spec. Then they have to figure out how to get it to the place, and then they move it. And so we'd rather buy or commission something. The light touch, we're going in flexi pave, small infrastructure modification. And some of this might be we can find ways to work within that existing budget, whatever phase, and some of it would be, an additional, depending on the interest in impact and how fast we want things done. A little more detail about what it means. I think we've done a lot of the light touch. You've seen this. We already have hundreds of these things downtown. They are great. It's a wonderful way, but you won't see a big difference you're not going to come Fayetteville Street and say, this is way different. Mid-range is where you're going to see a little more interaction. You're going to have a lot more opportunities for photographs, more playful. You don't want to cheap out on stuff people are going to swing on or play on. And then these sort of the big iconic, which is more in your getting into your 1%, where we're integrating an artist with a design team and thinking about something much bigger. And that's what you need.
I thought you had a question.
I'll go.
So you kind of read my mind because when you were saying about having everything be permanent art, in my head I was thinking, I wonder if we could do some type of temporary installation. So even though the overwhelming majority would probably be permanent, would we consider maybe just having like one dedicated space for temporary art, just to give emerging artists or some other artists an opportunity to have some exposure? I mean, I know it may be a little bit more costly with the moving expenses and all the things they have to do.
Yeah,
but
and the pedestals might not be the place for it because of to weld on that scale. You're not really an emerging artist. You need studio things, but some of the smaller plaza, a yarn bomb. I mean, I think there's lots of ways to integrate local artists in there too, and also artists can work with a fabricator too. So we can also put some scaffolding around what local or less experienced artists are doing and help them get to that scale. You don't want it to be extremely permanent, gone in a couple months. I think we'd want to see it, a little more durable.
because I was thinking about, and I tried to see it twice, the statue in New York that they put in it was a statue of a black woman. It just kind of appeared one day and then it was gone. I went twice and I missed it. But something along those lines that maybe it doesn't have to be fabricated, but it may be something that's already pre-existing art that artists would be willing to donate, but just to give an opportunity to highlight some local artists or even artists from other parts of the country. But
all in the mix.
yeah, all a mix and different types, be it different backgrounds of the artists or different types of art that they want to showcase. But I think that will give us an opportunity to have something new and fresh, and you may have people like me who want to track art and will travel to see certain pieces once they've installed.
We work with the DRA and Illuminate every year with that exact goal in mind. You give a lot of artist opportunities, and it's fresh and new, and it gets people to come downtown when they're not going, it's dark at 5. You're not going to want to come back down, but Illuminate's a great way. We partner with the DRA to make sure there's local artists there as well as the folks they're inviting in. And it's a wonderful way to do it, and it does keep it fresh every year, having all new artworks, and some of them do come back. And we're hoping to keep a couple up a little longer since it doesn't start getting light at 5 for a couple more months.
This may be for Ken.
Yes.
Sort of piggybacking on Mayor Pro Tem's comment and then the mayor's comment earlier. So it sounds like a lot of this art is going to be incorporated into the existing budget where there are opportunities to partner. And what I would like to see is when we're looking at this budget for Phase Now or 1A, where we have the line items for the wayfinding and activation toolkit. I mean, to the mayor's comment about making sure that some of this furniture doesn't look very dated, I mean, the examples we saw in the art presentation, I think that's a perfect opportunity there to make them interactive, like the bench that had the xylophones on it, and then even just like those swings that the artist made, I think looked a lot better than the swing example that we had in the first presentation. So however we can partner there, I think is important. To Mayor Pro Tem's comment, I see folks all the time that go down to Market Plaza just to see these temporary installations. And so if we could have part of the Market Plaza refresh include these like rotating art pieces, I could think of so many examples. Dick's Park had the wings that were on loan. So many people went there, the installations down in Market Plaza. So that can almost be something that drives foot traffic to Market Plaza if the community becomes accustomed to the idea that this almost is like a gathering space and a rotating art exhibit. And then lastly, I think that we need to pull into Phase 1A, or whatever we're calling it, permanent art for these 2 pedestals at City Plaza. Now, that may mean increasing the budget slightly, however, but Those light up heads that were there, people loved
Yeah.
those. Those were temporary, and obviously the heads don't really say Raleigh, North Carolina. They can be anywhere. But the idea that they looked good during the day and at night, I thought was really good. And so maybe it's two light up squirrels or something. I don't know. But I think we should have. I think we need to prioritize those pedestals in this first pass that we're doing.
Just,
Okay.
well, just some commentary. Of course, we just got off this incredible troll build at Dix Park, and it just makes you think about the power of community. And for those of you, I think they had 400 volunteers for that. They also had Preston Montague, the landscape architect, who's doing incredible work around rewilding, and I think he had dozens and dozens of volunteers, and just the power of people coming together to make it is its own kind of incredibly feel-good point. So thinking about how the community is involved in this, so it isn't just, right, the squirrel that was extruded in plastic in some factory and plopped up there. So, and then NC State School of Design, and I know we have long wanted to have a stronger presence of NC State downtown, and I guess they used to have some, presence. I was with Chuck Flink this week, but if there's a way to coming to that partnership and that sort of apprenticeship, and how do we work with the School of Design so that maybe NC State's got a little more of an anchor in downtown and a sense of ownership, because their students are part of a corridor from State to downtown, Fayetteville Street corridor, but like all that sort of conversation, and maybe they've already had some strong kind of input into this already. I don't know what the conversations with them have been.
Right. Well, I do believe that one of the recommendations from the economic strategy was to try to capitalize on the cluster of design businesses that are already in and around downtown and the design school as part of the making that existing niche more visible to the public through some sort of design center. I also remember when NC State had this little, in the basement of the,
Fish market.
yeah, the fish market. And that was a cool thing. I'm not sure exactly why it went away. It's kind of like the sculptures on the podiums. I think in terms of putting sculptures on the podium, that's something that we can look at. I don't know if that's going to fit within the $1 million budget without taking something out of that. Maybe that's an additional add-on that we can look to see how that might happen, because that it would be a very prominent location and the space for it is right there, waiting for it.
Yeah, I just want to think about how to integrate these art pieces into what we have money for right now and then into the future. The art pieces, that is what gets me excited. It's not the relocation of the benches, but I know that that's important. We have to do it. So when I look at this $1 million budget, I see the wayfinding and activation toolkit at $360K. How much of that can be the art budget? I just want to ensure that whatever we're doing does really have a thoughtful touch about the work.
Well, and I may be able to add to this too, and this may be something Mr. King may say, but he and I had a quick combo before this meeting about the horizontal planters, so the ones on the ground right now.
Yes.
Removing those may not actually provide that much of a benefit in this phase 1A, or do you think maybe it will? But why don't you come up and explain? Because we're trying to figure out if we could trade out some of that with putting it towards these art installation pieces.
And maybe, Chairman, if you,
Yeah.
apologies, Ken. This is just a note I think that might be helpful for the committee in this conversation, because I think to some extent the conversation you're having is what we sort of discussed on the staff side as well. I would look at that budget, if you want to use that term, not really in this way. It's more kind of order of magnitude where we think the cost might be for these elements. I think ultimately, if you all generally like the categories where the spend is going to happen, pay less attention to the cost, because ultimately when we get into the implementation, we may find that, to your point, there's maybe a planter we thought we might need to remove at a high level, but when we get granular, we figure out it could be left in place. there are other interventions. So there's going to be some shifting. I don't want you to necessarily get married to these specific numbers, because the reality is when implementation comes, there's probably going to be some massaging of these numbers anyway. These are rough estimates too, to be that's to be kept in mind. It might be a little more, could be a little less, but I think our goal would be certainly, to the extent we can shift costs, expenses to the additive elements, that's what we want to do. So just a note for the committee to keep in mind. Again, these are rough numbers, really more about order of magnitude than specifics at this point. So I thought that might be something you want to keep in mind.
Do we need to provide, we want 10% of the budget to go there? Or,
I think it'd be difficult to be that prescriptive. Honestly, my suggestion would be, at the point at which you're ready to make a motion, would be approve the categories of spend, and kind of with some direction that you provided around making sure that to the extent we can incorporate art into the elements that are going to be added and some other things. But I think it'd be most helpful for staff so that we can have the flexibility to turn up or turn down some of these specific categories if the authorization was about the categories of spending in the overall budget relative to the specific line items, because there's going to be variability in that beyond what you see today.
So that makes sense. So what I'm understanding then is the categories are repaint and relocate the benches, remove the horizontal planters, remove the granite seat walls, and install wayfinding and activation toolkit. And I think what we're hearing from the table is as for all 4 parts, but I guess really the wayfinding and activation toolkit, we want to emphasize as much art as possible. I personally would like to see the 2 permanent installations on the pedestals move forward in this phase. I don't know where the rest of the committee is on that, but I think that makes a big impact. And it's already there. We just need to build something to go there. And I don't know if that just gets put in with the wayfinding activation toolkit, or if that needs to be a 5th category that's added.
So just another couple, the bandstand does seem to be an architectural element that could really be the school of design, heightened sense of architecture, and a structure that's small enough and creative enough. And I think the art on the pedestals is incredibly important. I mean, just having been out at Dick's and Sarah, I mean, it's almost like you need to solicit some ideas that are at the right scale, see what comes forth. I mean, it's like the Dambo trolls, which are like the most popular thing since sliced bread. I don't think we're the most expensive thing. And then others, I really just think we should maybe do a solicitation, and then you figure out, and I think you could probably privately fundraise potentially. Yeah. Right? I mean, that is such a high profile spot. We've got so many folks that are activated about art right now because of the success of some of, the power poles and all that, that potentially, I just don't think we should limit ourselves to say, okay, we've only got a $100,000 budget. What do we do?
Yeah. So then maybe sorry.
Oh, no, when you're done, I have a couple pieces of color to add to this discussion.
Well, I was just say that maybe what we do then is, when we're getting ready to refer this out, we can approve the recommendations for 1A with the add-on that in the additive parts, we want to incorporate as much of these high level and mid-range art ideas that are on these slides. So the things that we're adding we're working with the artists to make them visually interesting and stand on their own. And then it sounds like we also would like to have you come back with a more formal, options for the bandstand. So that's sending the direction that we're going to give you the authority to go get it designed and come back with costs. And we can do the same thing for these 2 pedestals, is sending the direction to go ahead and start soliciting ideas and costs. And then those could just be like 3 separate things: the streetscape, the bandstand, and then the pedestal art.
Yeah. So just a couple points of clarification response. On the horizontal planters, there's been discussion at the staff level with DRAs. Can we, we propose targeted locations, but doing an entire block face all at once. And the alternative is like, well, we only do it where there's a restaurant today or some anticipation that there's going to be a restaurant. One of the things to remember is in any construction costs, there are costs that are fixed and those that are variable. And so it's more efficient if you're bringing a contractor out to work on a block to do the block, as opposed to doing half the block and then at some later date bringing the contractor back out on the site to do the remaining block. So you can't just divide it by the number of planners and say that's the average cost, because there's the marginal cost of adding additional planner can be lower than the average cost of the preceding planners, if you will. On the issue of the band stage, I think where we are with that, we hear a very strong desire to move forward with that, and I would suggest that that is essentially a new project that is an add-on to this, because it certainly was not part of the original scope with our current design team. I hear a desire to reach out to the community and the local design community for some ideas in that regard, and so I think probably the best way to approach that is as initiating a project that is specific, where that is a standalone project that's coordinated with this work, but is somewhat separate from it and maybe budgeted separately from the Fayetteville Street work. So I just wanted to make those 2 quick points.
Yeah, and I also want to add on the horizontal planners, just an idea, can they be repurposed into art? So, I mean, one of the issues I think right now is they're just very dull looking, plus the plants aren't well taken care of. But
Right.
if they were painted and then there were some permanent plants, as in not actual organic plants, but colorful, artistic sculpture plants that came out of them, something that actually adds that visible, visual interest. As long as, again, they're not in the way. I just think there are other options here. So, but I hear you about marginal costs and being thoughtful there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Councilmember Harrison, to your point, that's actually something that very idea is something we contemplated just conceptually, and it kind of lends to the point I was trying to make earlier that while we may at this very moment potentially envision removing that, if we find there's an opportunity to do something else, that it could stay, that it could be turned into an artistic element, as an example, that we just want to retain the flexibility to make that determination as we get into the implementation.
Yeah, I would just also note that we're looking at $1 million budget, and almost half of it is removing these horizontal planters, which from where they're located, in my opinion, doesn't seem to be opening up any walking path or outdoor dining opportunity. And so maybe the category is modification of horizontal planters, and that leaves it open for removal where it makes sense, or maybe doing something else with them. Because yeah, they could be great opportunities to do things there that draw people's visual interest. But I mean, $440,000 out of $1 million is a lot that we could be doing stuff with. So.
Can we put mosaic tile on them?
I think that's probably based on the direction. Yeah, I think that's kind of in there. We'll look for art at every turn with this, I think is what I'm hearing.
Well, if you put some sort of mosaic at grade as opposed to just pavers, you could still expand outdoor seating and select locations and have something that was visually interesting.
Is there anybody else here that wants to talk? Bill?
Would welcome we had such a great discussion last time.
Yeah.
Love to hear from folks out there.
All right, thank you all so much. Bill King, Downtown Raleigh Alliance. First off, I want to give a huge thank you to the city staff. They've worked really, really hard on this. They've taken a lot of feedback with a lot of grace and a lot of patience. A huge thank you to Ken, Dylan, and Danya for all their work on this. They've done a lot of work here. Thank you, Mr. Raleigh, for your work as well. Also, Michael, Pat, Stephen Bentley, who's not here, Paul as well have spent time. They have very complicated departments to run, and they've spent time on this project. So thank you guys for all the work. We appreciate it. We know you guys have been very gracious and thoughtful with listening to all the feedback. So I really appreciate this work. I feel like this has gotten much, much closer to vision, and appreciate it. Also appreciate staff identifying some resources to get going now, which is what we need. So I think that's great. I think the biggest thing I would reaffirm here is on the horizontal planters. If you look at this photo here, what you can see is those planter beds are closer to the curb. They're not in your future walk zone. So if you're moving outdoor dining up against the building, and then your walk zone there has to be basically between that zone and then the tree wells, which are closer to the building edge than the planter beds, you're not opening up walk zone really. That's core down there. So the planter beds is a very expensive part of this that I'm not sure you're opening up a lot of space with. And if you're keeping the planters you're not going to do anything with that space. So I would much rather, the add to me is going to get you the pop, and I would focus the remove on what is in the new walk path, which looks to me like some light poles and some benches. And that's where your subtract is. That'll open up that walk path that opens up outdoor dining in phase 1A. And to me, the horizontal planters here, because they're not in that space, and you have to keep the plinths up in order to have enough money, you're not opening up space for activation or new public seating. So given the number, now that we've seen the cost estimate here, I think I'd focus subtract on that walk path, and the horizontal planters, I'd move that to a phase to the point of, there's an economy of scale to this. Economy of scale is removing both the planters and the plant bed at the same time. I would put that in that phase when the funding is there, but focus on the direction you all have, which is the addition side. So I see that as important. I also want to thank Sarah and Kelly on the art side. They're incredible, and definitely defer to what artists can do with these spaces. I think our big message is just do something really powerful with it, right? And so Market Plaza in particular is so gray and challenging. It's not a great event space. And so being able to do something cool there would be really important. So I think any resources you all can provide in this first phase to do that, and more of the medium to high touch and less of the low touch, I think will have a bigger impact. So that would be my immediate feedback. I'm also happy to answer any questions as well.
It's helpful. I guess if we do leave the planters for some reason in the first phase, to many people's points, I also just heard Preston Montague, who is doing a lot of the rewilding, the landscape architect that's working up at Dix Park, and he was talking about how he was recreating these natural, meadows and seed plants. I don't know whether this is at all conducive to any of that, but that would be so cool to have this urban landscape with this really wild native there if we're leaving them. It might be worth a consult. Again, this is, NC State landscape and Preston, so.
Anybody else? Okay, so the direction I'm hearing then, I guess I'll make some motions, is I will move to recommend staff's recommendation for phase 1A with the following, I guess, modifications. The category remove horizontal planters, we're gonna leave that open to just
Modify.
something horizontal, modify. And then I want to add an emphasis on this art, particularly slides, I think it was 50, 51, 52, really 50 and 51, 51, 52, the mid-range and the high level. So when we're looking at the additive elements, really leaning in on the art presentation of what those look like and what they do. So moved. Second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? And then the second one will be to recommend that staff, I don't know the right word, I guess that staff continue with their efforts to design a bandstand for City Plaza and to bring back to the full council recommended design and funding. So moved. Second. Okay. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? And then the third, same motion, just have staff bring back to the full council a plan for permanent art on the 2 pedestals at City Plaza, as well as a funding recommendation. So moved. Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay. This was super helpful. We are not going to have a committee meeting in November or December. Mr. Raleigh, is there anything else on this topic that we need to hold, or can we refer it out, and if it needs to come back, refer it back to council?
I think we're ready to refer out.
All right, so then this entire topic has been referred out with these 3 motions, and we have no pending items as of right now. Anything else?
Great.
Okay, thank you, everybody. It's super helpful. We are adjourned.